What is happening, DFF Army? Back again with another mock draft review. This is going to be the first post-NFL mock draft review, and I wanted to get it out pretty quick. We did a 3-round, 12-team Superflex tight end premium rookie mock, and I have to say it was pretty wild, and the back end of the first is really gross. It's not somewhere that you really want to be having to pick between these 5 different players who could also just fall into the second round. So with that being said, let's just hop into it. All right, so we do have some DFF staff members in here, but we also have some people from the Twitterverse. So it's a pretty good, diverse group of people drafting here. So I'm going to try to get through this quick so y'all can get back to drafting. First overall pick, Bijan Robinson, ends up in Atlanta. No surprise there, right? Nothing changing. Second overall pick, though, Anthony Richardson ends up in Indianapolis. I think, anybody looking at it is pretty excited with Steichen there. He's going to have a really good opportunity to develop. So I think him jumping up to second makes sense for me. I think that's where I'll have it. And I do agree with our own draft director, Chris Miles from DFF here, going Anthony Richardson second overall. Third, we have Jahmyr Gibbs. And I'm not shocked at this, and I don't think it's really terrible. I mean, getting the draft capital that he did early in the first, going to Detroit, you can't really argue with just the history of running backs who are drafted in the first and the usage. So can't really knock anybody for making that pick. For me, I feel like I might still go one of those quarterbacks there, but I do see the trade value. You're really going to have a good window to move Gibbs if you want to. And shout out to our own Paul Patterson at DFF. He's been kind of pushing that narrative, and I am kind of getting on that train. Fourth overall pick, Bryce Young, Carolina, first pick in the draft. You can't really let him fall any further. And honestly, I think he's a really, really, really good quarterback, especially between the ears, high IQ. We'll see if it works out. Carolina is somewhat of a dumpster fire, but we'll see what happens there. CJ Stroud, 5. I mean, Houston's telling you they don't care about this new test that they have for this new test that they have for these players coming out in the draft. So CJ Stroud in Houston is getting some love there. I think at 5, it's a good pick, and you can't really let him fall much further. Jackson Smith-Njigba going 6 overall. I think this is great value. I like Jackson Smith-Njigba in Seattle. I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. It may take some time for him to develop, but he may be the best wide receiver in that room at some point, even over DK. It could happen. So I'm not shying away from Jackson Smith-Njigba. I do like him here. Quentin Johnston, 1.7. Honestly, getting drafted to the Chargers is a really great thing for his profile, I think. And obviously in the first round, that's huge for him. By the metrics, he really stands out. So he rises up to, I think I have him as the number 2 wide receiver in the class. So at 7, I think that's a great spot for him. I've seen him fall further, so I do think he could be a value here and there. Jordan Addison at 1.8. I don't think you can let him fall any further here. Minnesota's a great spot for him, but I will say I think his value's gotten really high. I saw a poll on Twitter where he was going over Jerry Jeudy, and I think that's crazy. Jerry Jeudy easily over Jordan Addison. So if I can get him and then trade him for some value like that, I'll probably do it. Zay Flowers at 1.9. I probably wouldn't let him fall any further than this either. I do like Zay Flowers. Even in Baltimore, I think what they're doing there, they're going to try to pass the ball more, and I think that he has the opportunity to be a wide receiver 1 on that team. Jordan Addison doesn't quite have that, so honestly, I'd probably select Zay Flowers over Jordan Addison. So I guess I said maybe I wouldn't let him fall much farther. I'd let him fall another spot because I think I do like Zay Flowers, at least the upside more than Jordan Addison. But honestly, Jordan Addison has definitely the floor and is in a great situation. So I can't go wrong with either of them, but I do like Flowers a little bit more, even if that's going against all the historical data and everything we know. Michael Mayer, my pick here at 110. Honestly, once it gets to 110 here, and we'll scroll over for the 111 and 112. Once it gets to 110, it is ugly. Like, I really didn't want to take Will Levis, who went to Tennessee. Honestly, I was talking all about it this offseason about not letting QBs fall, and maybe we still shouldn't. So maybe I should take Levis there. I can't deny that is something that I think is a good move, but man, it's just letting, the NFL letting him fall into the second round after getting top 5 buzz. That's just not a great sign. And I really love Michael Mayer's profile. I like the landing spot in Vegas. Obviously, McDaniels loves tight ends. This is a guy who I think has the upside of a top 5 tight end. So I would be targeting him pretty aggressively in this draft because I do think it really, really fades off here at the end of the first round. So you see Will Levis goes 111. Again, I can't argue that, but it's just tough. Kendre Miller at 112. He goes to New Orleans. Obviously, that's an interesting spot because Alvin Kamara and all that, and he could be the replacement eventually. He didn't get the best draft capital, so he's replaceable as well. And I don't really love Kendre Miller, but I do understand going running back here at this point, just taking those shots because it really does fall off, and a lot of players didn't get the draft capital we were hoping for. 2.1, Devon Achane. I do like this pick. I think you could even consider this at 110. I do think the landing spot is good enough for him, in Miami to be fantasy friendly. But again, he's a small back. He didn't get draft capital like Gibbs, so it is kind of hard to really, really buy in like that. So I do like him here at 2.01. I do think he might have to go ahead of Zach Charbonnet, who got drafted to Seattle because they're absolutely madmen over there, and Pete Carroll just wants to make fantasy managers absolutely insane. But I love Charbonnet. I don't really understand what the usage can be for us to enjoy whatever fantasy production he's going to give us. So I'm a little concerned there. I do understand it at 2.02 though. It's a value compared to what we expected, and he's a great player. So I just think Kenneth Walker's a great player too. So it's not like he's going to take over. It's going to be tough there. Dalton Kincaid goes to Buffalo, 2.03. This is okay. I'd probably have him more towards the end of the second. I'm not quite sure he can get the consistent usage that everybody wants from him, even though Buffalo's a juicy landing spot. If you really want him, I think you could buy back into him maybe later if he doesn't really pan out and if he doesn't pop or if he's inconsistent. I think you can do that. It happens with tight ends a lot. Somebody told me that, they don't like that narrative. It's a pet peeve because a lot of times you can't buy them back. I haven't had that experience. I think you can find windows to buy these guys in. I think that's true for almost any player. So, take that for what it's worth, I guess. Rashid Rice, really, 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 really surprised Rashid Rice got as high draft capital as he did going to KC. But, the landing spot is king, so it's going to push him up. And obviously they think he's a better player than I do. So that matters. And I obviously got to push him up my rankings a little bit. 2.4, little high for me, but he could be the wide receiver 1 there, I guess. I think it's just a lot of wide receiver 2, 3s. And Patrick Mahomes is amazing. Jonathan Mingo gets way higher draft capital than anybody expected, and maybe just over other guys that we expected. To Carolina, helping Bryce Young a little bit. Maybe look, he came from Ole Miss. That there's talk of like DK Metcalf and AJ Brown, more of AJ Brown mold. I don't, he's not that, but maybe he's better than expected. In the middle of the second, I guess that's what we're doing here, right? Hendon Hooker, 2.06. I like this. I like Detroit for Hendon Hooker. I like Hendon Hooker a lot. I think this gives him a couple years to heal up, to develop, and he could be a really nice player. So I like him here at 2.06. I like that more than Will Levis at 111. Josh Downs at 2.7 goes to Indy. I think with Anthony Richardson, he's going to get kind of a bad rep at this landing spot, but I don't think it's a bad landing spot. They do need a guy that can play the number 2 role, and he can do that really well, play the slot. Josh Downs fell in this draft. I don't know why. I don't think anybody can explain why. I think there were some injury concerns, maybe. They got a value. I like him a lot. 2.07 is probably a steal for Josh Downs, and maybe not a steal, but it's a good spot for Josh Downs. I think it's okay. Tyjae Spears, 2.08, Tennessee. It's behind Derrick Henry. He's dynamic. He's a different kind of player. I know some people don't like him, but I don't think it's a terrible landing spot, and I think at the end of the second here, you can do it. You could do it. I don't know. I'm trying to see if there's anybody who I'd really select over him. I do think Marvin Mims is a really good option just based on the draft capital he got and going to Denver. So I think maybe I'd go Marvin Mims there instead and take these guys at the back end of the second and towards the third round. Roshan Johnson goes 2.9. I like that a lot. Khalil Herbert was never safe, and this just proves it. Roshan Johnson is going to handle a pretty significant workload, I think, for the Chicago Bears. I like him here at 2.9. I think he has some fantasy viability going forward. Again, I said I like Marvin Mims a couple picks earlier. I picked him here at 210. I was surprised he fell here. I think a lot of people have him at the early second. So if I looked, I was working around my rankings. I think I have him early second to mid second. I wouldn't let him get this far personally. Love him here. So I like getting Michael Mayer and Mims at this spot, but I don't think that'll always happen. I think you're going to have a little bit more underwhelming options maybe come your real draft tomorrow or whenever that is. Luke Musgrave, tight end, Green Bay. Don't love it. I just don't love it. I just don't think he has a ton of upside. And Jordan Love, I don't know. I'd much rather go with Jaden Reed, honestly, who went to Green Bay as well. And Jordan Love, yeah, but I like Jaden Reed more because I think he's actually a really good player. So 212 for Jaden Reed, solid. I think you can get him in the third round. but I like Jaden Reed a lot. That's a good pick at the end of the second there. Jalen Hyatt going to the Giants is a really good football pick, but I like it for Daniel Jones. I think it helps their offense a lot, but I don't think it's a good fantasy landing spot, and I really don't know if you're going to get what you want out of him, and he's more of like a best ball play. So, yeah, but I mean, at 301, I guess. I'd rather Cedric Tillman, who got drafted to Cleveland, who is his teammate back in Tennessee in college. He went a couple picks after him. I think that'll happen a lot. I'd much prefer Tillman, so I'd fade Hyatt, I think, a little bit. Sam Laporta, I like him a lot. I might have him ranked over Kincaid. I like the Detroit landing spot a lot, to be honest with you, for check down king Jared Goff. So I think we could maybe even possibly put him over Kincaid. Yeah, I think that's what I'm doing. So again, yeah, I'm probably just not going to have any Kincaid. I'll probably have a lot more Laporta and maybe Mayer, depending on where my landing spot is. Cedric Tillman, good pick here at 3.3. I like it. Stetson Bennett, I don't know what to tell you. I don't really like that. I think you could get him probably at the end of the draft. So I don't think you need to be doing that in the third round. Tank Dell, love this pick at 3.5. I love the draft capital going to Houston. Very, very excited about it. I think it was very surprising that he got the draft capital. Now, he could just end up being a guy they want to use special teams, whatever. I think he's an insanely good route runner. So I think it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. They get a weapon for Stroud. It's pretty interesting. I do like Dell. We'll see what Houston's doing. They had an interesting draft, but I like Tank Dell. Israel Abanikanda unfortunately ends up on the Jets behind Breece Hall and Zonovan Knight, who we just found out last year is a pretty decent player. So I think it's going to be hard for him to find touches and get on the field and produce. So I don't love it here. I'd much rather even take the shot on Tank Bigsby, the next guy who ended up in Jacksonville, who really also probably isn't going to get the opportunity that some hoped. So I wasn't a big fan of him, but I do think better option there. Personally, I'll get to my pick in a second. Kayshon Boutte goes to the Patriots at 3.8 here. I guess there's some upside there. I don't love it. I wasn't a big fan of Boutte. He felt like crazy in the draft, so that's probably why they picked him. If you really like him, you can definitely get him for cheap. Chase Brown, I like over the last three guys I talked about. I love the landing spot in Cincinnati. I think he's going to be a really, really good player in the league, and he has a really good opportunity there with Joe Burrow and team to really carve a rollout for himself, especially with word Joe Mixon may be out, cut candidate, definitely not going to be there a year from now. So I like Chase Brown, and I think he can develop, and he's a really explosive player. So good landing spot for him. And I was really trying to grab him at the 310 there, and I missed out, unfortunately. So I went Deuce Vaughn, ended up in Dallas. His dad's a coach there. Tony Pollard's the only other one there. He's dynamic. He is small, but I think he can make it happen here. So I do like Deuce Vaughn at the end of the third round here, just taking shots on running backs, right? It's a good spot to do it. Darnell Washington in Pittsburgh, not great, right? Like, Pat Freiermuth is already there. He's a freak of nature, but they probably drafted him to block a lot more than they did to catch passes. Will Mallory in Indy, 312. I absolutely love this pick, and I love that it wasn't me because I've been calling Will Mallory's name out for a couple months now, or at least a month now, and ending up in Indy. They don't have a tight end that they've used consistently. I love this target for Anthony Richardson. Big fan of Will Mallory, and I just think he's going to break out eventually. We have a couple years probably until it happens. So you just sit him on your taxi squad and just wait it out like you do with most tight ends. But I do like Will Mallory, very athletic guy, and I think he has some blocking skills and he can stay on the field. So I like that pick a lot, and I love that happened, and it wasn't me in this draft. I hope you enjoyed our first edition of the post-NFL draft rookie mock draft review. I love doing these. I love doing the mock drafts. Doing the mock drafts are super helpful. I have a couple drafts starting in the morning, so doing these drafts are super helpful for me. I hope they're helpful for you. And if you like what we're doing at the Dynasty Football Factory YouTube page, please subscribe, and please follow me on Twitter at WillieBeemanDFF. Catch you next time. Later, fam.